Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain and welcome back to another Ranger Top 10. We've talked about some of the main characters and a lot of the main villains, but there's nothing quite like the excitement of a brand new Ranger getting added to the team. And because said additions often demand their own backstory, several of those same Rangers end up making valuable story contributions, even in limited time. But before we get started, let's make one thing clear up front. Tommy Oliver will not be part of this list, not because he doesn't deserve to be, he obviously does, but because we already covered him in length when we discussed Green and Black Rangers. His roles there happen to fall under this video's category too, so there's really no point in repeating myself. And yes, that same logic applies to Cam, Dylan, and Ziggy, all of whom would have also made this list. With that all explained, let's finally kick things off with number 10. I know what you must be thinking, a Samurai Ranger? You gotta be kidding me. But I'm not, and here's why. Yeah, sure, Antonio's semi-Spanish catchphrases get really old really fast, but something we'll discuss a lot with 6 Rangers is how many of them brought an added dimension of personality to the team. Most of the best ones aren't just new additions, but introduce completely novel characterizations and storylines, and so it goes for Antonio. For all of Samurai's misgivings and missteps, Antonio is far and away the most consistent form of life and energy this show has. And this makes sense as a character angle, because everyone on the team was born into this life, forced into this destiny via bloodlines, except him. But he was so hell-bent on becoming a hero anyways, that he not only trained himself to very, very impressive results. Remember, he's at least as good as the firmly disciplined Kevin early on. But he also found a way to use his head to create his own morpher, to revolutionize Samurai Ranger technology, and add new Zords to the arsenal. When you really think about it, he is insanely valuable to the cause, and the team didn't even want him originally. You'll recall that they showed him the door despite everything he proved to be early on, which probably says more about the terrible mentorship the Rangers had this season than Antonio himself. And at the end of the day, Steven Skyler actually portrays this character very well. A welcome departure from stony expressions, god complexes, and whatever the hell Mike was supposed to be. A better season could have done a lot more of the interesting ideas he represents, but as is, he's still top 10. Calling Jason Scott a really good 6 Ranger almost feels unfair given how easy and welcome his return to the team was. It's similar to how Kurama became a Ranger because her predecessor just couldn't do the job anymore, same with Trey of Triforia. But this was the first time that Power Rangers tried something like this, and it worked for one powerful reason: character dynamics. The idea of the original team plus Tommy and the successive iterations being close friends and supporting each other added a lot of heart, humanity, and charm to the original Mighty Morphin seasons. And in line with that, they gave us the return of Tommy and Jason's friendship. Regardless of how their real-life relationship has regressed since then, during this time, it was still a potent dynamic, and they actually made smart character choices after bringing Jason back. It wasn't just about his cool new suit or his giant pyramid Zord. It was about the fact that even now, after having led the Rangers for years, Tommy still looks to Jason for advice and help. And Jason does what he always does, reassures him, brings out the best in him. But not just him, Rocky too. Because with Jason now part of the team again, Rocky feels even less impactful than usual. And it makes sense because remember, Rocky's the one that replaced Jason, and now he feels like he's the one being replaced. And in line with his previous role as leader, Jason finds a way to reach out to Rocky as well and assure him that he's a real part of this team. Jason's return was relatively straightforward, but it was also everything it needed to be on the back end of Zeo, and it only adds to his lengthy and storied legacy. It figures that the first purely original 100% American Ranger is also one of the better ones. After all, the best villains are also American exclusive, so it's a wonder that we don't get more of both nowadays. Ryan Mitchell is a good example of a 6 Ranger with a captivating backstory that adds onto the season in progress. Captain Mitchell had to make the ultimate call while his family's life literally hung in the balance, and Diabolico, being a villain, naturally uses that angle to train Ryan in the ways of evil. Ryan's character arc and what his return means for Captain Mitchell and Dana also represents a great example of one of my favorite types of dynamics in Power Rangers, the father-ranger dynamic, and we get two of it here. For whatever reason, mothers have it a bit tougher on that end. But it adds a brand new layer to everything that Captain Mitchell is going through and trying to accomplish, in addition to creating a powerful reason for Ryan to complete his arc, as opposed to just getting hit really hard and snapping out of it. Budgetary restraints kept the Titanium Ranger from making more appearances with the team, but one of the defining elements of this era of Power Rangers was making the most out of setbacks. So, instead of just forcing contrived scenarios where he's MIA for whatever reason, Ryan made the active choice to get proactive, start looking for answers, aid in ways that Mariner Bay couldn't, but still be there when he was needed most. And that's the biggest thing that stands out about Ryan as a character. He's a unique Ranger for all the reasons I discuss, but he's also a good character with a defined personality and vision in terms of how to end this demon crisis. Not a ton of overall screen time, but Ryan Mitchell made the most of the time that he was given. The trio of Paishui Masters turned Rangers presents a situation where the characters in question don't really function like Rangers despite being Rangers, kind of like Udana, mainly because of relative time spent morphed. This also applies to Kat Manx, but I see her as more of a supporting character, so don't worry, she'll be on another list. But I don't really see that as a major problem, or even a problem, since most of you are overly familiar with my mantra of Power Rangers are people first. The Spirit Rangers are a great example of just that, because the primary reason all three are this high is how each of them add to the themes of Jungle Fury by progressing all four Rangers present. Master Fat is a more straightforward lesson, but it adds a welcome new layer of toughness to the often less aggressive Lily. Master Finn provides a great challenge for both RJ and Casey, as well as uncovering more about the intricacies of the relationships among all three, providing the best character-driven episode of the three Master episodes. And Master Soup is the most valuable on the education side of things, as his lessons are the most interesting and the most needed given who he's teaching. And the way he teaches is exactly the way Theo needed to learn. The fact that these all-time great Ranger mentors are Rangers on top of their invaluable contributions is just icing on the cake. In a season predicated on learning to be great and looking beyond expectations, these masters find unique ways to embody all of that while also learning a thing or two themselves from the situation at hand. And what the Spirit Rangers became as a result was essentially a better version of what Dagron added to Mystic Force. So while they weren't morphed for all that long, nor did they really even have morphers, all three earn a spot on this list for heavily contributing to an all-time great and all-time underrated season of Power Rangers. A big part of why In Space saved the franchise is how it literally and figuratively expanded the limits of the Ranger narrative by creating personal stories within the final frontier. Within that story is Zane, who is a lot of things, but he represents something very powerful too. Both him and Andros became Rangers. They didn't just find their morphers at random, meaning that the roles the former Turbo Rangers undertake likely once belonged to others no longer with us. Thus, Zane probably represents the last dying breath of the previous In Space team, which gives context to Andros' early actions and why he preserved Zane for all that time. But, focusing more on Zane, he brought with him a comedic style that Rangers never really had before him, a unique charisma that helped to balance the considerably darker tone this season took relative to the previous ones. For all of the great story arcs and characters this season boasts, Zane was flat out entertaining and was a major step above the at times stiff acting present in the early days. In fact, he was so charming that he convinced Astronema to date him before she realized the truth about her past. And yeah, responsibility and stuff, but him attempting to sneak out of Ranger duty just to make it to that date was one of the funniest Ranger scenes ever filmed. But even with the humor of that episode, it still showed a powerful side of Zane, one that could see the goodness in Astronema before even Andros saw it. He's a prankster, a flirt, and plenty of fun, but even one of Astronema's monsters recognized Zane as one of the universe's most powerful Rangers, a statement that actually carries weight, since this is Season 5, and we've seen all kinds of otherworldly Rangers to this point. I consider Zane almost an evolved version of Ryan Mitchell because of his powerful backstory, his strong connection to a member of the team, and being very proactive and resourceful in his own right. All of those traits, mixed in with his memorable personality, made him all-time great. Dino Thunder thematically is built on understanding the past, but creating your own present, and few characters embrace that theme more than Trent Mercer. We know he's an update to the classic Green with Evil saga, but instead of just copying that, they conceive a unique story that's more fitting with the modern Ranger team. Instead of a spell, it's more of a duality with Trent trying to fight off his evil White Ranger counterpart, and the imagery does very well to sell his psychological horror as an arduous, gut-wrenching ordeal that takes several episodes to overcome and several more episodes to truly be rid of. But then, Dino Thunder uses Trent's struggles to allow the others to contribute with their own perspectives, thus giving Kira the role of confidant, Connor the role of the distrusting one, and Tommy the role of been there before, and it all works. It also presents Trent as a natural parallel to his father Anton Mercer, who also has an evil other half forcing him to do evil deeds. And then the best parts of the later story became about reconciling all of that information and both Mercer men finding a way to resolve as characters by expelling the evil within, which in turn gives us one of the best uses of the father-son character dynamic I mentioned before. But in addition to his narrative influence, Trent doesn't slouch as a character, giving us really solid delivery with his unique brand of mopiness mixed in with just a dash of angst because he is still a teenager after all. Trent's character arc was one of the most difficult in all of Power Rangers, but with a little help from his friends, he managed to overcome it, and he looked damn good while doing it. The most interesting thing about Time Force is how most of the meaningful character development can be tied back to any one character's relationship with Wes. He helped develop Jen into the greatest Pink Ranger ever, and likewise, his counterbalance to Eric helped make him an all-time great Sixth Ranger, and the setup is perfect. Eric has had to struggle and fight his entire life just to scrape by, while people like Wes skate on good fortune and better finances. It would have been easy, if not a little comically overdone, for Power Rangers to make him more of an antagonist, but even at his worst, he's always treated as someone who's just a little bit misguided, but never completely wrong. That was the smartest route to take, because the way he's operated is the reason he has a Silver Guardian job, which in turn leads him to becoming the Quantum Ranger. He's highly skilled, highly motivated, and highly ambitious, all great traits. So then, his character arc became not about losing any of that, but about slowly and methodically gaining the knowledge that others can change their destinies. Others can actually push him forward instead of holding him back. Others can be trusted. It's a long journey towards a character resolution for Eric, but what makes him a great character is the fact that it should be. The Eric we first meet is the way he is because of years of ingrained perceptions about life, and that's not going to change overnight. Somebody please tell Ninja Steel that. Instead, it's patient, it's paced out, and filled with both steps forward and steps backwards because every path has a few bumps on the road. And in time, Eric learns that even though Wes and him are different, they can still be equals. They can still be friends. The picture-perfect ending for one of the franchise's greatest and most complex characters. Mike Corbett is a hard Ranger to rank in any context, and that's not even factoring in his somewhat dubious Ranger status, since he does technically transform into an alien as opposed to simply obtaining a standard supersuit. There's points on either side of that debate, but to me, he's a Ranger through and through, and that's that. But what then makes him hard to rank is the fact that Magna Defender is both him and his own completely different character. But Mike might have also been influencing the choices made by Magna Defender, ergo why Leo could tell Mike's spirit was still alive. So basically what I'm saying is the attribution is kind of tricky. Even still, Mike Corbett proves to be an exceptional Ranger in limited time. Remember that his first act as a character and as a Ranger, since the Red Quasar Saber was supposed to be his, was to sacrifice himself so his brother could take his place. Mike Corbett, just as much as any character in the greatest season ever, embraces the theme of sacrificing for others. And for as big of an ask as that is, almost everything noteworthy he does after his return is basically also that. When Captain Mutiny is running a camp of slaves, Mike jumps into the proverbial deep end again to save everyone there. And immediately after, Mike nearly dies again to save everyone he just saved plus the colony so that they can all escape the Lost Galaxy. For as great as Leo proves to be, top 5 franchise character easily, this season would not have lacked in quality if Mike found a way to stay on as leader. It might sound sacrilegious coming from me, but from where I'm standing, Mike could have been just as great as Carter. Every scene he's in, every action he takes, every decision he makes, he keeps proving why he's absolutely perfect for this season, and why he was able to pull that sword out to begin with. More so than any other added Ranger, his relationship with his successor matters because it pushed him forward and made him greater. And then, when Mike came back, he helped Leo to realize that his current destiny was always his to undertake, while Mike himself was able to embrace a brand new destiny. And, as we discussed, his second chance was not wasted. From the beginning to the journey's end, Mike, as both a Ranger and as an influence, was one of the driving forces of the season, and Lost Galaxy simply would not be Lost Galaxy without him. David de la Torre represents the epitome of an actor perfectly suited to play his Ranger role. There have been plenty of really good portrayals of Rangers over the years, but this one might just be the best one, and it kind of had to be to get the most out of the quirky, unconventional, but still layered mentor turned Ranger in RJ. We understand that Jungle Fury prides itself on character growth through proper tutelage, but it also prides itself on looking beyond the surface level. RJ represents both traits perfectly. While the Masters allowed the Rangers to learn lessons in a more traditional fashion, RJ is anything but traditional, as is apparent with his choice to embrace the wolf spirit. And that's critical, because that out-of-the-box mentality perfectly coincides with the fact that Casey is also something of an outsider on his own team. The season knows this, and highlights that dynamic, which allows Casey to learn, and shows off the myriad of ways RJ is able to teach. And then, when RJ does become a Ranger, they do the smartest thing they could do by placing him and Casey at an awkward leadership crossroads. And once again, RJ's unique brand of mentorship shines through and helps both characters come to new understandings. There's a lot of great Ranger mentors, but so few who can be as inventive and creative as RJ, who also goes through his own valuable struggles as a character. Through those struggles, even Fran is able to be a valuable contributor to the theme of learning, in addition to RJ being able to reconcile with his father. Jungle Fury is a very smart, very purposeful show with its message, its plot, and how the characters are affected by both. But RJ added that extra something that made the series a blast to watch, in addition to being an interesting season to discuss. That would have been enough to make him high on this list, but what then makes him top tier is how necessary his character episodes are. How they represent important character hurdles that require continual growth and aren't just cleanly resolved after 22 minutes. Jungle Fury as a season, better than almost any other season, made all of their characters matter, and while Casey is more narratively important, he never would have been without a great master. But just edging out RJ was the one Ranger I consider the greatest mentor of them all. Before we get to him though, let's bring in some honorable mentions. One aspect of my previous S.p.d. review that was regrettable was not talking enough about Kruger specifically, so hopefully this entry rectifies that to some extent. Kruger is easily the best character in Power Rangers in terms of organizational leadership. His poise, his experience, his ability to test and lead his team in very specific ways makes him a cut above anyone else in a comparable role. In the same way that the Spirit Rangers were necessary additions to Jungle Fury, while not really needing to be Rangers themselves, Doggy could have never been the Shadow Ranger and he'd still be a great character. But seeing as how he is the Shadow Ranger and what that all means, it only adds to his personal narrative as well as the narrative of S.p.d. What we see with Shadow Ranger is very unique character-wise. For most Rangers, suiting up is simply a given, even when the powers come later on. But for Doggy, it's not that simple, nor can it be, because the last time he raised arms to fight, his entire race fell to Grum and his forces. More so than any other Ranger, Kruger has a true emotional hurdle to overcome before he can even fight again, let alone morph. And even after he does morph and can call upon the shadow powers, he's still somewhat reluctant to jump into battle. It's mainly to teach his cadets a lesson, but I think it's also about knowing that the last team that relied on him died right next to him. So that has to be subtly influencing his decision making before overcoming that hurdle too. Kruger's role as a Ranger created a complex struggle with no easy solutions, which is a Space Patrol Delta specialty. But his role as a top-tier mentor is really what places him above everyone else. He's smart enough to know exactly how to challenge Sky, and eventually turn him into the Red Ranger he always could be. He's wise enough to allow Bridge the freedom to handle things in his own way, because Bridge's methods often get results. He's understanding enough to give Z a chance to be part of something bigger, a chance she always wanted. And he's just demanding enough to turn Jack into a better leader than anyone thought he could be, even Jack himself. And through it all, he never once loses sight of what S.p.d. as an organization should be. Even when Grum himself is his opponent, he never wavers from the singular idea that ties the season together: justice. John Tui was pretty good in his second mentor role just a season later, but before that, he was nearly infallible. And more so than any character on this list, nothing about the season Kruger is in would work without him, and specifically him at the center of it all. Doggy Kruger is number one, so the list is done. And as always, thanks for watching.
Justice is served.
Well done, Doggy.